What if the love you were searching for was standing beside you all along? A love you never saw coming. Before we begin, tell us in the comments what city are you watching from? And don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10 at the end. At 34, Nadine Anderson had crafted a life so polished it could have been carved from Italian marble. Her luxury branding agency, Anderson Creative House, occupied the top floor of a glass tower in Echo Atlantic, where CEOs, oil tycoons, and political families fought for a spot on her client list. Her penthouse overlooked the Atlantic, with automated blinds, imported art, and a kitchen she barely used because she was always working. Her life was everything she had built with grit, brilliance, and a refusal to settle. And yet, something was missing. It hit her hardest at night, around 2 a.m. when the city lights dimmed and Lagos's restless hum gave way to silence. That was when the ache in her chest made itself known. A longing, a craving, a dream too fragile to say out loud. She wanted a baby. Not an aesthetic accessory or a societal checkbox, not a donation, not a clinical arrangement, not a man chosen from a spreadsheet offering 604, Ivy League, loves dogs, spirit animal, eagle. No. Nadine wanted a child with someone who actually existed in her life, someone who had a heartbeat she could lean on, a laugh she could memorize, a man whose hand she would hold during ultrasounds. But as her 35th birthday crept closer like a ticking countdown, the pressure grew heavier. 35 wasn't old, not in the general sense, but for fertility, it was a line doctors circled in red ink. Advanced maternal age, Google called it. Nadine hated that phrase. It made 35 sound like a creaking door. She had options. Everyone reminded her. Adoption, fostering, IVF, sperm banks with curated donor lists and glossy profiles. She'd even visited one, an ultra-modern facility in Victoria Island with chrome walls and framed motivational quotes about choosing your future. They had everything: height, education, family history, even handwriting samples from donors. Just select your preferences and begin your journey, the consultant had said, smiling too brightly. Nadine had smiled back, but inside she felt hollow. She wanted more than a journey. She wanted a family. And for reasons she couldn't explain, her mind kept circling back to one moment in her past. One memory, one promise. A pact she made when she was 17. Back then, she had been a shy, clever girl living in Mercury Ridge, the high-end gated waterside estate in Banana Island, where private security outnumbered palm trees. Her neighbors were the elite, politicians, CEOs, ambassadors. Her world had been pristine swimming pools, luxury school uniforms, chauffeurs, and carefully curated futures. And in the center of that world had been two boys, William Jones and Maverick Sheriff. William was the classic golden boy, charming, friendly, always smiling. Girls loved him, boys envied him, teachers adored him. Maverick. Maverick had been different. He was quieter, sharper, more intense. He had eyes that read people like chapters in a book and a mind that never seemed to rest. Even at 17, he was tall, reserved, and devastating without trying. Girls didn't approach Maverick. They stared. But William, he was the one who made the pact. They were sitting near the water one Harmattan evening, dangling their feet over the dock behind William's house, watching the lights ripple across the lagoon. Nadine had just confessed how afraid she was of ending up alone, how she worried that love might not be for everyone. William nudged her shoulder and said, "If we're both single at 40, we'll marry each other. Promise." Teenage Nadine laughed, but they shook on it anyway. A silly vow, a harmless joke, except it never left her. And now that she was 34, with 35 approaching like a deadline, that old promise felt less like a joke and more like a lifeline. One sleepless night, she found herself typing his name into Google. She hadn't seen him since they were 17. Life had moved on. She'd gone to the UK for university. He stayed back in Lagos. She'd built an empire. He'd vanished into adulthood. It only took 10 minutes of internet digging to find him. William Jones, still single, still living partly between Nigeria and Europe, still smiling in every photo, Still, William. Her heart tightened. But that wasn't the only name her search uncovered. There he was, Maverick Sheriff, the boy who had grown into a man carved from shadows and brilliance, the founder of Sheriff Cyberdynamics, Nigeria's most powerful private cybersecurity empire, a billionaire before 33, the kind of man Forbes called dangerously intelligent. Maverick wasn't smiling in any of his photos. He never had. But the intensity, the quiet magnetism, the strength, it was all still there. Nadine stared at his image longer than she should have. Because Maverick hadn't just been part of her childhood. He had been her first crush, her first heartbreak she never admitted, the boy she thought she could never have. She closed the laptop, pressed her palms to her eyes and whispered, "Why now?" But she already knew why. Loneliness wasn't driving her back to Mercury Ridge. Fear wasn't either. It was hope, a tiny spark that refused to die. So she packed a suitcase, booked a car, and the next morning, she left her Echo Atlantic penthouse behind. As the gate of Mercury Ridge opened for her, the childhood memory hit her full force. The manicured lawns, quiet streets, security patrols, and houses so stunning they resembled modern palaces. She felt 17 again. Her heart pounded. Because she hadn't just returned to honor a pact with William Jones. She had returned to face the one person she had run from for 18 years, Maverick Sheriff. And she had no idea that he had been waiting for her return all along. The security gates of Mercury Ridge rose like polished steel monuments as Nadine's car rolled to a smooth stop. The guard scanned her pass, glanced at the tablet on his stand, and then lifted his eyes to study her through the tinted glass. Recognition flickered there. Her last name still carried weight here, even after all these years. "Welcome back, Miss Anderson," he said when the window slid down. The words hit her chest harder than she expected. "Welcome back." As the gates parted, the car eased forward into a world that looked like money had been poured over it in liquid form. Glass mansions glittered, reflecting the soft afternoon light. Balconies wrapped around sleek buildings. Driveways were paved in stone, lined with manicured hedges. Private docks stretched into the water, polished yachts rocking gently against the tide. Palm trees stood in perfect formation, tall and curated, as if even nature had to meet aesthetic standards to be allowed in. It had been almost 2 decades since she'd last driven down this road. Half of these houses didn't exist when she was a teenager, but the feeling, the chill of perfection, that was the same. "Ma'am, we're here," the driver said. Nadine blinked out of memory and turned toward the house in front of them. Maverick Sheriff's home. It wasn't ostentatious, not in the way some of the others were. His mansion was mostly glass and dark stone, low and wide rather than tall and looming. It had elegant lines, clean edges, and huge windows that turned the interior into a visible world of its own. Marble floors, warm lights, and subtle art. It was powerful, modern, understated. Exactly like the boy she remembered. "Now a man!" The driver opened her door. Nadine stepped out, smoothing her cream blazer with hands that trembled more than she wanted to admit. Her heels clicked against the stone as she looked around. Large terrace, infinity pool, planters with white roses, and beyond that, the quiet shimmer of water. The front door opened. He appeared. For a heartbeat, Nadine forgot how to breathe. A nerd's Maverick Sheriff filled the doorway like it had been built around him, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a charcoal shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms and dark tailored trousers that emphasized the solid strength of his frame. There was nothing boyish left in him. His jaw was sharper, his cheekbones more defined, his hair shorter on the sides and a little longer on top, as if he hadn't bothered to tame it fully. His eyes, the same intense, storm-dark eyes she remembered, locked on hers with such focus that she felt it all the way to her spine. His lips parted slightly. "Nadine." Her name and his voice did something strange to her stomach. He descended the shallow steps with slow, measured strides. He didn't rush. He didn't stare like he'd seen a ghost. He simply took her in, each detail, each second, a man who processed everything and showed nothing unless he chose to. Maverick, she managed, forcing a small smile. It's been a while. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Subtle, expensive, a mix of cedar and something darker. A tiny muscle in his jaw flexed, the only visible sign that her presence affected him at all. Almost 20 years, he said quietly, but you look exactly like you walked out of here yesterday. She let out a soft, disbelieving laugh. You're lying, but I'll take it. One corner of his mouth lifted. It wasn't a full smile, but seeing it felt like watching a private sunrise. Come on, he said. You must be exhausted. He gestured toward the open doorway. One of his staff, a neatly dressed woman with a tablet and an earpiece, appeared silently to take Nadine's luggage. Everything moved with quiet efficiency, like a well-organized operation. Of course it did. This was Maverick. Inside, the house looked like a design magazine had bowed its head and surrendered. Soft gray marble floors, warm recessed lighting, modern art with splashes of color, and floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the water outside like a moving painting. It was luxurious but not loud, expensive but intentional. Your place is... She turned slowly, taking it in. Wow. Functional, he replied. She shot him a look. This is not functional. This is the kind of place people pretend to have on social media. His lips twitched again, and she realized he hadn't lost that dry humor she used to secretly love. He led her out onto the terrace where a small round table had been set with a chilled bottle of champagne and two fluted glasses. The infinity pool reflected the sky, and beyond it, the water stretched out, calm and glassy. I thought we'd start with this, he said, pulling out her chair. She sat, still not entirely sure if this was real or some elaborate dream her anxious brain had crafted at 3 a.m. He poured champagne, the bubbles rising in a delicate rush. To what are we drinking? She asked, taking her glass. He sat opposite her, his gaze never straying. To you being here. I wasn't sure you'd ever come back. Heat pricked her cheeks. She lifted the glass to her lips, buying herself a second. So, you knew I left for good, she murmured. His eyes hardened just a little. You didn't exactly leave a forwarding address. That's fair, she admitted. I was eager to disappear. From here, he said, or from us. The question was too sharp, too direct. Her heart gave a startled thump. She placed the glass gently on the table. I needed a clean break, she said eventually. New country, new career, new life. Lagos felt like a bubble that was going to suffocate me. And now? He asked. Now? She glanced out at the water, then back at him. Now my life is very full, but there's one thing missing. And that missing thing led me back to Mercury Ridge. Something shifted in his gaze. Interest, concern, curiosity. Maybe all three. Is this about your agency? He asked. A client? A deal? She shook her head. No, this is personal. He leaned back slightly, but his eyes stayed locked on her. All right then, personal. The silence stretched between them like a held breath. Nadine felt the weight of the moment settling around her, pressing on her chest. She twisted the stem of the champagne glass between her fingers. Do you remember William Jones? She asked softly. There it was, the first crack. Maverick's expression frosted over for the briefest second, almost too quick to catch, but she caught it. Yes, he said. I remember William. We had a pact, she continued, her voice thread thin. When we were 17, we were sitting by the dock behind his house, and he said, if we're both still single by 40, we'd marry each other. Maverick stilled. The air around them changed. The breeze seemed to quiet. Even the soft lapping of water against the docks faded beneath the weight of her words. And you came back for that? His tone was calm, but there was a roughness at the edges now. She forced herself to meet his eyes. I came back because I'm 34. 35 is around the corner. I want a child. I want a family. And I remembered the one person who once promised me I wouldn't end up alone. He said nothing. His fingers flexed once on the arm of his chair, then went still. Nadine swallowed. I know how it sounds. I know it's ridiculous to show up after all this time because of some stupid teenage vow. But I looked him up, Maverick. He's still single. He's not married. And I thought, maybe the universe was reminding me of something I'd forgotten. Maverick's jaw tightened. William, he said slowly. You're here for William. She exhaled shakily. Yes, I need to see him, talk to him, at least know if the possibility exists. For a moment, all she heard was the faint hum of traffic far beyond the gates, distant and irrelevant. Maverick's eyes were dark, unreadable. But under that surface calm, something hot and unyielding sparked. When was the last time you saw him? Maverick asked. Before I left, she said. We messaged a bit during my first year abroad. Then, life happened. We lost contact. He studied her for a long, silent moment, as if weighing every word, every micro-expression. Finally, he nodded once. I'll take you to him, he said. It was the answer she'd hoped for. So why did it hurt? Thank you, she replied, her throat tight. But there was something in his voice when he spoke again, something low and controlled and dangerous. Tomorrow, he added. We'll go tomorrow. I'll make some calls. She nodded, trying to ignore the way her heart hammered at the calm edge in his words. And Nadine? Yes? Maverick's gaze held hers, steady and unflinching. Just don't assume you're the only one who remembers that doc, or that pact. A shiver slid down her spine. Because in that moment, with the sun dipping low and his eyes burning into hers, she realized something she'd spent years refusing to acknowledge. Maverick. Sheriff was not nearly as indifferent as he pretended to be. The next morning, the sun rose over Mercury Ridge in shimmering gold, glinting off the glass walls of Maverick's mansion. Nadine barely slept, her mind twisted and tangled through memories, nerves, and what-ifs until dawn finally dragged her out of bed. Maverick was already waiting downstairs, dressed in a crisp white shirt and dark trousers, sleeves rolled neatly to his forearms. He didn't ask if she was ready. He simply held out a travel mug of coffee and said, "Drink, you'll need it." That alone forced a small, frail smile from her lips. They drove in silence through the polished streets of Mercury Ridge, slipping past security gates and manicured hedges before joining the traffic toward Victoria Island. The air conditioning hummed, the city buzzed beyond the tinted glass, and beside her, Maverick's calm presence pressed against her awareness like a steady heartbeat. He drove like he did everything else, precise, deliberate, unhurried, as if nothing could shake him. Nadine wished she felt even a fraction of that steadiness. When they crossed into Victoria Island, the scenery shifted. Steel towers, luxury boutiques, rooftop pools perched above designer stores. Maverick navigated effortlessly through it all until they reached a quiet street on the outskirts, a row of secluded apartments hidden behind palm trees. Nadine frowned. This doesn't look like William's style. He moved here 3 years ago, Maverick replied. Low profile, fewer social events. He travels a lot. Travels? She echoed. Something tightened in Maverick's jaw. You'll see. He parked and led her toward the entrance. The moment they stepped inside the cool lobby, Nadine's stomach twisted. Something about the stillness, the echoing emptiness, felt off. The concierge stood when he saw Maverick. Good morning, sir, he greeted respectfully. His gaze flicked to Nadine. Are you here to see Mr. Jones? Yes, Nadine said quickly. I'm an old friend. She faltered. We have something important to discuss. The concierge sighed softly, almost pityingly. I'm very sorry, ma'am, but Mr. Jones isn't here. She frowned. Is he away for the day? I can wait. No, ma'am, he's out of the country. He's been away for 6 months now. He travels between Dubai and Switzerland. His company relocated him. Nadine blinked, stunned. 6 months? Yes, ma'am. And the man hesitated, glancing awkwardly at Maverick before continuing. He's engaged. His fiancée is with him. The words hit her like cold water. Engaged. Her chest squeezed painfully. He's getting married? Yes, ma'am. Mr. Jones has no immediate plans to return to Nigeria. His fiancée's family is abroad. The concierge softened his tone. If you'd like to leave a message, I can send it to his assistant. Nadine stood frozen. The pact, her last grasp at hope, shattered like thin glass. Behind her, Maverick exhaled slowly. A subtle sound, controlled, almost quiet. But somehow she heard the truth in it. He already knew. She whispered a thank you, her voice wobbling, and turned away before the kind-eyed concierge could see the hurt on her face. Maverick guided her gently toward the car with a warm hand at her back. She didn't resist, didn't speak, didn't breathe properly until the door closed behind her and the city noise faded into the gentle hum of the engine. He started driving, and she broke. Why didn't he call? She whispered. Why didn't he tell me he was engaged? You hadn't spoken in nearly 2 decades, Nadine, Maverick said quietly. I know, but... Her voice cracked. I thought the pact meant something. It meant something to you, he corrected softly. Not to him. The blunt truth stung. Tears slipped down her cheeks before she could stop them. She turned her face toward the window, embarrassed. Maverick didn't look at her, didn't intrude, but the way his hand tightened on the steering wheel made it clear he felt every tremor in her silence. 20 minutes later, he pulled into the underground parking of Skyfall Lagos, the upscale rooftop restaurant known for its golden lighting and soft jazz. He stepped out and opened her door without a word. Maverick, I don't... Yes, he said firmly. You need to eat. She didn't have the strength to argue. Upstairs, Skyfall glowed with warm amber lights, soft music drifting around them like a comforting blanket. The Lagos skyline stretched across the glass walls, glittering like diamonds. Maverick chose a secluded corner table away from the lunch crowd, intimate, quiet. The waiter took their drink orders and left. Silence lingered like a third presence between them. Finally, Maverick spoke. I'm sorry you had to hear it like that. Nadine swallowed hard. I shouldn't be surprised. I shouldn't have hoped so much. You're allowed to hope, he said gently. You're allowed to want a family. You're allowed to want more. She blinked, startled by the softness in his voice. Maverick, she drew in a shaky breath. You knew, didn't you? You knew he was engaged. His gaze didn't waver. Yes. She closed her eyes. Why didn't you tell me? Because you were determined, he replied honestly. If I told you he was engaged, you would have thought I was trying to interfere. You needed to see it yourself, to accept it yourself. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw no triumph, no satisfaction, just quiet understanding. Still, she whispered, it hurts. I know, he murmured, but it's not the kind of hurt that destroys you, Nadine. It's the kind that prepares you. For what? She asked bitterly. His eyes softened. For the truth. She frowned. What truth? Maverick leaned back, exhaling slowly as if releasing years of restraint. When he spoke again, his voice was low and deliberate. I knew about your pact with William. I've always known. Nadine's breath caught. What? He told me, Maverick continued. Back then, the night you two sat on the dock, he came to me afterwards and said he made a promise to you. He thought it was funny, cute. His jaw tightened at the memory. I didn't. She stared, heart hammering. So you knew? All these years? Yes. And you never said anything? No. Why? She whispered. Maverick looked out at the skyline, gathering words that had been buried for nearly 2 decades. Because I was in love with you, Nadine. The world stilled. Her breath stilled. Her pulse raced so fiercely she felt it in her fingertips. Maverick continued, voice roughened by truths long caged. I was 17 and stupidly in love with you. But William got to you first. He joked with you, made you laugh, and I wasn't the boy who could do that. I didn't know how. He looked at her then, really looked, his eyes open, unguarded. So I stepped back, he said quietly. I stepped back and watched the one girl I wanted make a promise to someone else. Nadine's throat closed. Her hand trembled on the table. Maverick, she whispered. He didn't reach for her, didn't lean close. He simply let the truth sit between them, heavy and electrifying. You deserve someone who would make you smile, he said softly. I didn't think I could be that person. Her chest tightened painfully. You were wrong. For the first time, something flickered across his face. Surprise, longing, regret. And beneath it, desire. Not lust alone, something deeper, something that had waited too long. Their eyes locked, and the air changed, dense, charged, intimate. Her skin tingled, her pulse thudded. The distance between them felt dangerously small. Maverick, she breathed, why are you telling me this now? Because, he said, voice low and steady, your pact is dead, Nadine, and I need you to know that it never should have been with him. He leaned forward slightly, eyes burning into hers. It should have been with me. Her breath shuddered out of her. Their chemistry, once soft, hidden, unspoken, ignited like wildfire. And Nadine Anderson realized that everything she thought she knew about her past was only the beginning of what she was about to feel. Nadine spent the rest of the afternoon pretending she was fine. She wasn't. Her mind kept replaying Maverick's confession, his voice low, unwavering, almost painfully sincere. I was in love with you. She could still feel the weight of those words pressing into her skin, lingering in the quiet corners of her thoughts. So she did what she had always done when life backed her into a corner. She ran. Not dramatically, not with tears, not with slammed doors. She simply excused herself after their meal, thanked him for the ride home, and slipped into the quiet of her penthouse suite before her heart could betray her composure. But feelings had a way of catching up, no matter how far or fast she tried to outrun them. The sun had long disappeared by the time she stepped onto her balcony, overlooking the glittering stretch of Echo Atlantic. Warm lights from below reflected in the water, and a soft breeze brushed against her bare arms, raising goosebumps that had nothing to do with the cold. She closed her eyes. Engaged. William is engaged. The pact is dead. And Maverick? Maverick was in love with me? She pressed a hand against her forehead, exhaling shakily. This wasn't part of the plan. She came back to Lagos to find closure, to secure the future she wanted before turning 35. She came back expecting a conversation with an old friend, not a confession from the one man she had never been able to forget. A soft knock sounded behind her. Her heart stilled. She turned. Maverick. Sheriff stood in her doorway. He wasn't supposed to be here. She hadn't heard the elevator or the door alarm. He must have used his building access. Of course he had access. He had access to everything. He stepped onto the balcony, his presence filling the small space effortlessly. He wasn't rushed. He wasn't flustered. His expression was calm, confident, intensely focused on her. Maverick, she whispered, pulse fluttering. What are you doing here? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he came to stand beside her, looking out at the waves crashing gently against the shoreline. The night wrapped around them, warm and still. You left without letting me finish, he said quietly. I needed air. I know. His voice softened. But I'm not leaving things like that. Not after waiting this long. Her breath caught. Nadine, he continued, turning to face her fully. I meant what I said today. Her heart thudded. I know. That's why I left. A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. You always run when something matters too much. That's not fair. It's true. She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. Because he wasn't wrong. She had always run, from Mercury Ridge, from her feelings, from every emotional risk that threatened to shake the carefully constructed life she built. But Maverick wasn't here to let her run anymore. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the subtle stubble along his jaw, the flecks of silver beginning to form near his temples, the intensity in those storm-dark eyes. "Nadine," he said softly, "look at me." She did, slowly, reluctantly, completely. And then he said the words that shattered the last piece of distance between them. "Marry me instead." Her breath hitched so sharply it hurt. "Maverick, what? No, no, you can't just—" "I can," he said simply. "You don't even—" "Maverick, this is insane." "Is it?" He crossed his arms, not in defiance, but with the quiet confidence of a man who had thought through every scenario before making a move. "You came back because you want a family. You want a partner. You want something real. And I've been waiting half my life to say this to you." She shook her head, stepping back. He stepped forward, matching her retreat with calm certainty. "Maverick," she whispered, voice trembling. "We haven't spoken in 20 years. That didn't erase how I felt. We're completely different now." "Good," he murmured, "because I don't want the 17-year-old version of you. I want the woman you became, the one who built an empire with her bare hands, the one who survived heartbreak and fear and success, the one standing right in front of me." Her chest tightened. "You don't even know if we're compatible." He smiled, slow, irresistible, devastating. "Nadine, I've known you longer than any man alive. I watched who you were. I watched who you became. I kept track of your career long before you knew I was watching. And I've seen enough to know exactly what I want." She swallowed hard. "I want a family too," he continued. "I want something real. I want something that lasts. I want someone I trust with every part of me. And I want—" He paused, eyes dropping to her lips. "You." Tears stung her eyes before she could stop them. "Maverick," her voice broke, "I can't make this decision lightly." "I'm not asking you to decide tonight," she exhaled shakily. "But I am asking you," he said, stepping closer, "to stop pretending you don't feel what I feel." He lifted a hand, brushing a stray curl from her cheek. His touch was warm, intentional, gentle. "Nadine," he whispered, "you've been in my head for almost 2 decades. I couldn't have moved on even if I tried, and God knows I tried." Her lips parted around a trembling breath. "I know you're scared," he murmured. "So am I. But don't walk away from this without giving us a real chance." The wind swept around them, carrying their silence to the shore. Finally, she whispered, "You're asking me to marry you." "Yes. And we haven't even kissed." He smiled, slow, knowing, unbearably tender. "We can fix that." Before she could process the words, he slipped a hand behind her waist and pulled her gently toward him. Not forcefully, not desperately, just with the steady assurance of a man who knew where he belonged. Her breath caught when his forehead brushed hers. "Natty," he whispered, using the nickname he hadn't spoken since they were teenagers. "If you don't want this, really don't want this, tell me now." She didn't. She couldn't. Because everything in her, fear, longing, memory, pulled her toward him like gravity. Maverick breathed out once, slow and deep, as if releasing every restraint he'd been holding for years. Then he kissed her. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't demanding. It was soft, slow, devastating in its tenderness. A kiss that felt like a door opening rather than closing. A kiss that felt like a home she didn't know she'd been searching for. Her hands slid into his hair. His arms tightened around her. The city lights glowed around them, turning the balcony into a world of warm golden shadows. By the time they pulled apart, Nadine's heart was pounding so hard she felt it in her fingertips. "This," she whispered breathlessly, "this feels like an ending." "No," Maverick said, softly cupping her cheek. "It feels like the ending you were always meant to reach so you can finally start your beginning." And Nadine realized she wasn't running anymore. Christmas in Mercury Ridge wasn't a holiday. It was an event, an extravagant, sparkling, breathtaking display of wealth and fantasy that felt like stepping into a luxury winter fairy tale. Imported snow drifted from hidden machines placed along the walkways. Golden lights wrapped around palm trees until the entire estate glowed like a palace. Classical carols played softly from concealed speakers, blending with the quiet laughter of families gathering on decorated terraces. Champagne fountains shimmered like liquid gold, and the scent of cinnamon and hot chocolate hung in the warm Lagos air. It was beautiful, stunning, perfect. And yet, Nadine felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff, staring at two very different futures. It had been 4 days since Maverick kissed her on the balcony, 4 days of electric silence, 4 days of Maverick giving her space, just enough to breathe, but not enough to pretend any of it didn't happen. He hadn't pushed, he hadn't demanded, he hadn't even brought up his proposal. Instead, he simply showed up, quietly, thoughtfully, with an unshakable certainty that both irritated and soothed her. Every morning since that kiss, he sent breakfast to her penthouse. Nothing overwhelming, just a simple tray, fresh fruit, croissants, and coffee made exactly the way she liked. Every afternoon, he checked in with a text. Home by 6. If you need anything before then, let me know. Every evening, he invited her to join him for a walk around the estate or dinner at his home, without pressure, without assumption. He gave her room to think, but not room to run. Tonight was Mercury Ridge's annual Christmas Eve gala, a spectacle hosted by the wealthiest families on the island. Guests arrived in chauffeured cars, wearing designer gowns and tailored suits, while orchestras played on floating platforms over the water. Nadine stood at the top of the grand marble staircase in a deep emerald gown, staring down at a world she once belonged to, and a life she wasn't sure she was ready to choose. Her fingers tightened on the railing. The pact with William was over. Her illusion of a neatly planned future was gone. And now Maverick, a man she had wanted long before she knew what wanting meant, was offering her something real. A future, a family, him. A sharp ache pressed behind her ribs. She had wanted a baby. She had wanted security. She had wanted certainty before turning 35. But suddenly those desires felt small compared to what Maverick offered. He didn't offer a contract or convenience or a promise born out of panic. He offered love, not loud, dramatic love, but steady, quiet, uncompromising love. And it terrified her. Nadine. The voice slid over her like warm velvet. She turned slowly, cautiously, went his Maverick. Sheriff stood a few steps below her, dressed in a black tuxedo that fit like it was designed for him alone. His hair was slicked back just enough to show the sharp angles of his face. His eyes, dark, focused, devastating, shimmered with a softness meant only for her. He walked toward her, each step confident and sure. "Hi," she whispered, breath catching. "Hi," he murmured back. He reached her, offering his arm. "You look beautiful." Her cheeks warmed. "So do you." He huffed a quiet laugh. "I'll take it." They walked down the staircase together, slipping into the glowing world of the gala. Maverick kept her close without crowding her, guiding her through clusters of guests with subtle touches, a hand at her back, a brush of fingers against her wrist, a gentle tilt of his head that made her feel seen in a room full of glittering strangers. Every touch made her chest tighten. Every breath near her skin made her tremble. Every look made her feel like she was falling deeper. And that was the problem. Because falling in love at 34 felt more dangerous than falling in love at 17. Love meant vulnerability. Love meant risk. Love meant surrender. And Nadine wasn't sure she knew how to surrender. Hours passed, music, laughter, clinking glasses, families taking photos against golden backdrops. Yet Nadine's awareness remained tethered to one person. Everywhere she looked, she found Maverick watching her, quietly, steadily, with a devotion that unsettled and grounded her at the same time. Near midnight, he leaned close, his breath warm on her ear. "Walk with me?" She nodded. He led her out of the ballroom, through a quiet hallway, and onto a private terrace overlooking the lagoon. Snowflakes drifted around them from hid machines, melting the moment they touched warm skin. The night was soft, glowing, impossibly serene. Maverick faced her, slipping his hands into his pockets. Not nervous but controlled, giving her space to speak first. She didn't. She didn't know how. Finally, he said it gently. "You're quiet tonight." "I'm thinking," she whispered. "About you." A slow exhale left him, as if he'd been holding his breath for hours. "What about me?" "About what you said." Her voice trembled. "About wanting me. About wanting a family. About wanting all of it with me." His jaw flexed, but his voice remained steady. "I meant it, Nadine. Every word." She looked at the snow drifting past them, white against the night sky. "I didn't come back for you. I didn't even realize I still, you know?" "Loved me?" he offered softly. She swallowed. "Felt anything?" "You don't have to label it yet," he murmured. "Just feel it." Her eyes lifted to his. "I'm scared, Maverick." "I know." He took a step closer. "I'm not." Her breath hitched. "Why?" she whispered. "Why aren't you scared of choosing me?" "Because I already did," he said, voice low and certain. "Years ago." She closed her eyes. He continued. "You don't have to decide tonight. You don't have to marry me tomorrow. You don't have to promise me anything." Then he brushed a snowflake from her cheek with a touch so tender she almost broke. "But I need you to know this. I'm here. Not for a pact, not for a substitute, not because you're running out of time. I'm here because it's you." Her heart clenched. Slowly, painfully, beautifully, she whispered, "I don't want the pact anymore." His breathing deepened. "I don't want William, or a deal, or an arrangement, or a backup plan." Snow drifted between them like blessings. "I want you, Maverick." He didn't hesitate. He pulled her into his arms, holding her as if he'd waited half his life for this moment. His embrace was warm, solid, achingly familiar, and when he lowered his forehead to hers, she felt the world settle into place. "Then let me love you for the rest of our lives," he whispered. A tear slipped down her cheek, soft, quiet, hopeful. And for the first time in years, Nadine didn't feel alone. She felt chosen, she felt wanted, she felt home. 1 year later, the Sheriff Anderson home in Mercury Ridge glowed with the kind of warmth that came from more than just expensive lighting. Soft golden bulbs wrapped around the grand staircase, evergreen garlands draped the marble railings, and the faint scent of cinnamon drifted from the kitchen. Outside, the snow machines hummed quietly, dusting the terrace in delicate flakes that looked almost real under the soft glow of lanterns. But the real magic wasn't in the decorations. It was in the quiet little scene unfolding by the towering Christmas tree in the living room. Nadine sat curled into the plush cream sofa, her hair loose around her shoulders. A soft cashmere blanket draped over her legs. Nestled against her chest, wrapped in a tiny pink onesie, was their daughter Maverick Sheriff, the miracle she once feared her life wasn't built to hold. Maverick slept with her tiny fist curled around the fabric of Nadine's dress, her breathing soft and peaceful. The weight of her, gentle and warm, felt like a gift Nadine still woke up grateful for every single morning. The room was quiet except for the soft crackle of the fireplace and the faint rustle of the Christmas tree's ornaments swaying gently when the air shifted. Maverick entered quietly, as if afraid to disturb the little world forming between mother and daughter. He wore a simple white shirt and gray lounge pants, sleeves pushed to his elbows, dark hair slightly tousled from running his hands through it. He stopped when he reached them, just stood there for a moment, taking them in, his family, his entire world, wrapped in soft Christmas lights. Nadine looked up and smiled, her heart swelling. "You're staring." "Of course I'm staring," he murmured, kneeling beside her. "Look at you. Look at her." His voice thickened with emotion he didn't bother hiding. "Do you have any idea how long I prayed for this without even knowing I was praying?" Nadine's chest tightened with warmth. Maverick wasn't a man who cried easily, but the softness in his eyes was unmistakable. The first time he held Mirabelle, The stoic, controlled man she thought she knew had crumbled in silence, pressing his face into their daughter's hair like she was the missing piece he'd been searching for his whole life. He reached out now, brushing a fingertip over Mirabelle's cheek. "She looks like you," he whispered. "She has your eyes," Nadine countered softly. He smiled, slow and full of gratitude, as he cupped Nadine's jaw and kissed her forehead. "Tired," he murmured. "A little," she admitted. "But I'm happy. So happy it almost hurts." Maverick lowered himself onto the sofa beside her, careful not to jostle the baby. Then he slipped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her gently into his side. Nadine rested her head against him, breathing in the familiar mix of cedar and warmth that had become her anchor. Outside, snowflakes drifted from the terrace machines, settling on the glass doors like soft blessings. The distant lights of Lagos shimmered across the water, bright, alive, beautiful. Maverick pressed a kiss to her temple, lingering there. "You know," he whispered, "there's something I want to tell you." She leaned into him. "What is it?" His lips brushed her hairline. "I didn't just want a pact, Nadine." She closed her eyes, heart clenching. "I wanted you," he continued softly. "I always did." Her breath trembled. Even now, married with a newborn in her arms, those words pierced deep, rewriting the parts of her heart she once believed were unlovable or unreachable. She turned her face toward him, brushing her lips against his. A soft, tender kiss, one that carried a year's worth of gratitude and a lifetime's worth of promise. "You have me," she whispered against his mouth. "You always will." Maverick exhaled shakily, resting his forehead against hers as if grounding himself in the truth of her words. His hand slid gently over Mirabelle's tiny back, his thumb stroking her softly. For a long moment, the three of them stayed like that, wrapped in warmth, wrapped in silence, wrapped in love that felt more real than anything either of them had ever known. Nadine stared down at Mirabelle, tears gathering in her eyes. "Do you realize," she whispered, "how close I was to choosing a different life? To chasing a promise from the past instead of the future I truly wanted?" Maverick kissed her cheek gently. "You found your way home." "Yes," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I did." Because Maverick wasn't a pact. He wasn't a fallback. He wasn't a last-minute plan to outrun fear or time. He was the love she was meant for all along, the one whose quiet strength soothed her storms, the one who saw her, not the successful branding mogul, not the woman racing against a biological clock, but the girl he'd fallen for long before she ever knew how deeply she could be loved. Mirabelle stirred softly, her tiny lips making a faint pout as she snuggled deeper against Nadine's chest. Maverick smiled down at his daughter, brushing a soft kiss to her head. "Merry Christmas, little miracle." Nadine's heart melted completely. She looked around the room, the Christmas lights, the snow outside, the glow of the fire, and knew with aching certainty that everything she once feared losing had been replaced by something infinitely better. A family, a future, a love that was steady and quiet and unshakable. And as the city of Lagos sparkled beyond their windows, Nadine whispered a silent thank you into the warm silence for Maverick, for Mirabelle, for the life she never thought she'd be brave enough to choose. Because she hadn't just found love, she had found home.